The password was our anniversary. The irony was a special kind of poison, seeping into the quiet of my husband's home office, a room that had always felt like his sanctuary, a place I rarely entered. But he'd left his laptop open, a careless mistake for a man who was usually so meticulous, and a single notification banner glowed on the screen. It was from her, the nanny, Sophie. Just one line of text that shattered my world into a million silent, screaming pieces. "Can't stop thinking about last night, Marcus. You were incredible." My hand flew to my mouth to stifle the gasp that threatened to escape. The air thickened, turning heavy and unbreathable. Last night, he had told me he was working late, closing a deal that was crucial for the firm. He had called me around 11, his voice tired but affectionate, telling me not to wait up, telling me he loved me. I had fallen asleep with a smile on my face, proud of my hard-working, dedicated husband, the man who was building a perfect life for us, for our 6-year-old daughter, Lily. Now, the memory of that call curdled in my stomach. Where had he been calling from? Her bed? Had she been lying next to him, listening to him murmur endearments to his clueless wife before hanging up to kiss her? The thought was a physical blow, knocking the wind from my lungs. I stood there, frozen, my reflection a pale, ghost-like figure in the dark screen. For 5 years, I had been Mrs. Clara Thompson, a role I had embraced with my entire being. I had given up my career as a graphic designer to raise our daughter, to create a perfect home, to be the perfect, supportive wife to my ambitious husband. Our life was a carefully curated photograph of suburban bliss, the sprawling 2-story house, the manicured lawn, the annual family vacations. And Marcus, my handsome, charming Marcus, was the centerpiece of it all. He was the sun, and I was just a planet, content to orbit around his warmth. Now, his warmth was revealed to be a scorching fire, and I was just a moth who had flown too close. I sank into his expensive leather office chair, the one he'd bragged about for weeks after buying it, and felt my world tilt on its axis. My fingers trembled as I moved the mouse, the cursor hovering over the message preview. I had a choice. I could click away, close the laptop, and pretend I had seen nothing. I could retreat into the comfortable denial that had been my home for so long, clinging to the fiction of our perfect life. Or I could click and face the ugly, devastating truth. They say ignorance is bliss, but I was beginning to understand that ignorance was just a slow, creeping death. The old Clara, the one who existed just 5 minutes ago, would have chosen ignorance. She would have been too scared, too fragile to handle the fallout. But as I stared at that message, something inside me shifted. A dormant part of my soul, a part I thought had vanished long ago, began to stir. It was a cold, hard knot of something that felt dangerously like rage. I clicked. The message history that unfolded was a brutal, detailed account of my own betrayal. Weeks of it, secret meetings disguised as late nights at the office, flirtatious texts filled with inside jokes I didn't understand, and pictures. Pictures of them together, in his car, at a bar I didn't recognize, and one that made my blood run cold, a selfie of Sophie, our nanny, wearing one of my favorite silk robes in what was unmistakably our master bathroom. She was smiling, a triumphant, smug little smile that told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just a fling. This was a conquest. She wasn't just sleeping with my husband. She was trying on my life, and he was letting her. The finality of it was absolute. There was no misunderstanding this, no explaining it away. This was a deliberate, calculated betrayal orchestrated by the 2 people I trusted most in the world. My husband, the man I had built my life around, and our nanny, the young woman I had welcomed into our home to care for our child. The sound of the front door opening downstairs jolted me back to the present. It was Lily and Sophie, back from the park. Their laughter echoed up the stairs, a cheerful, innocent sound that felt like a mockery. I quickly closed the laptop, my movements stiff and robotic. As I stood up, my eyes caught a framed photo on Marcus's desk. It was from our last family vacation, the 3 of us on a beach, smiling, the picture of happiness. I looked at the smiling woman in the photo, the trusting, naive Clara, and I felt a surge of pity for her. She had no idea what was coming. But the woman standing in this office now, the woman whose heart was a block of ice in her chest, she knew. They thought I was weak. They thought I was a fool. They had mistaken my love for blindness and my trust for stupidity. That was a mistake they were going to regret for the rest of their lives. I walked out of the office, closing the door softly behind me, my mind a storm of cold, clear, and methodical thought. The war had already been declared without my knowledge. Now, it was time for me to plan my first battle. 3 months earlier, Sophie had entered our lives like a whisper of fresh air. She was 24, bright-eyed and brimming with the kind of gentle energy that children are drawn to. Her resume was perfect, glowing with references from other families in our affluent suburb. During her interview, she'd spoken about her passion for child development with a sincerity that won me over instantly. Marcus had been even more impressed. "She's perfect, Clara," he'd said after she left, his voice full of enthusiasm. "Polite, professional, and Lily already adores her. We should hire her on the spot." I had felt a flicker of something then, a tiny, unidentifiable unease at his eagerness. But I had dismissed it as my own insecurity. Marcus was a man who appreciated competence in all its forms. Of course, he would be impressed by a capable nanny. It was a testament to his high standards, a quality I had always admired. So, Sophie became a part of our household. She was, by all accounts, a model employee. She was patient and creative with Lily, organizing intricate craft projects and educational games. She kept the playroom immaculate and was always willing to stay late when Marcus and I had social engagements. She called me Mrs. Thompson, with a deferential respect that I found both charming and slightly old-fashioned. I saw her as a godsend, a solution to the overwhelming demands of being a full-time mother in a world that expected perfection. I had more time for myself, for the gym, for lunch, with the few friends I had maintained since leaving my job. I felt lighter, less burdened. I didn't realize I was simply outsourcing my life, making it easier for my husband to live his. The red flags were there, of course. They always are, in retrospect. They were just small things, easily dismissed, tiny threads in a tapestry of deceit that I couldn't see because I was standing too close. There was the way Marcus started working late more frequently, always with a plausible excuse. A client dinner, a deadline, a team meeting that ran over. He would come home smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine, but I had convinced myself it was just from being in an office building with other people. Then there was the way he spoke about Sophie. "Sophie thinks we should enroll Lily in soccer this spring," he'd mention casually over dinner. "Sophie found this great new organic market downtown." It was always, "Sophie thinks." Sophie found. He valued her opinion, her discoveries. I told myself it was because he respected her as Lily's caregiver, that he was simply engaged in his daughter's life. I didn't want to see that he was building a separate world with her, a world of shared opinions and secret discoveries that didn't include me. The financial signs were there, too. Unexplained credit card charges that he would brush off as business expenses. "Don't worry about it, honey. The firm will reimburse me." I never questioned it. I had handed over control of our finances to him years ago, trusting him completely. "I was the creative one," he would say, and he was the numbers guy. It was a partnership, a division of labor that made our lives run smoothly. I didn't understand then that a partnership without transparency is just a dictatorship in disguise. Sophie, for her part, played her role with chilling perfection. She was always careful to maintain a professional distance from me, always respectful, always calling me Mrs. Thompson. But with Marcus, I now realized, the dynamic was different. I remember walking into the kitchen one afternoon to find them laughing together, leaning close over the island as they looked at something on his phone. The moment they saw me, they straightened up, the laughter dying in their throats. "Just showing Sophie that funny video of Lily from last weekend," Marcus said, his smile a little too quick, a little too bright. Sophie just looked down, a blush creeping up her neck. At the time, I read her reaction as shyness, perhaps embarrassment at being caught in a casual moment with her employer. Now, I see it for what it was. Guilt. The ugliest incident, the one that should have torn the veil from my eyes, happened about a month before my discovery. I had come home early from a charity luncheon and found the house unusually quiet. I assumed Sophie and Lily were in the backyard. I went upstairs to change, and as I passed the master bedroom, I heard voices. Marcus's voice, low and murmuring, and Sophie's, soft and punctuated by giggles. My heart had hammered in my chest. Marcus was supposed to be in a meeting across town. I pushed the door open to find him standing by the dresser, fully dressed, while Sophie was folding our laundry, a task that was explicitly not part of her duties. They both jumped when they saw me, their faces a mask of surprise. "Marcus, what are you doing home?" I asked, my voice tight. "Meeting got cancelled," he said smoothly. "Thought I'd come home and surprise you. I saw Sophie struggling with the laundry baskets, so I was just giving her a hand. It was a lie, and I knew it, but I wanted so desperately to believe him. The alternative was unthinkable. So I smiled and thanked him for being so thoughtful and ignored the sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. That night, he made love to me with a desperate, frantic energy that felt less like passion and more like a performance. It was an act of reassurance, a way to silence the doubts he must have seen in my eyes. And like a fool, I had let him. I had allowed myself to be soothed by his lies, to be lulled back into a false sense of security. I had chosen comfort over truth, and that choice had led me directly to this moment, sitting in his office, the digital evidence of his betrayal burning a hole in my memory. The old Clara was dead, and in her place was a woman who would never make that mistake again. My first move was one of self-preservation. I couldn't stay in that house, not for one more night. The walls seemed to be closing in, every object a monument to a life that was a lie. The bed we shared, the kitchen where he'd lied to my face, the living room where our family portraits mocked me with their false smiles. I needed to escape, to find a neutral space where I could think clearly, where the air wasn't thick with the ghosts of his betrayal. After Sophie put Lily to bed, her face a perfect mask of innocent duty, I went into my daughter's room. I watched her sleep, her small chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm, and my resolve hardened into something unbreakable. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about her. She deserved a mother who was strong, not a mother who was a doormat. She deserved a life built on truth, not one propped up by pretty lies. I packed a small overnight bag for each of us, my movements swift and silent. I grabbed my laptop, my wallet, and the few pieces of jewelry my grandmother had left me, tangible links to a time before my identity had been swallowed whole by my marriage. Then, I wrote a note. I kept it simple, devoid of the emotion that was raging inside me. "Marcus, Lily, and I are going to my sister's for a few days. She has a family emergency. We'll call you tomorrow." It was a weak lie, but it would buy me time. That was all I needed now. Time. Time to plan. Time to gather my forces. Time to transform my grief into a weapon. I drove through the night, the city lights blurring through my tear-filled eyes. But these were not the tears of a victim. They were tears of rage, of grief for the life I had lost, but also tears of a strange, terrifying rebirth. With every mile I put between myself and that house, I felt a layer of my old self shedding away. The Clara who believed in fairy tales, the Clara who trusted blindly, the Clara who thought love was enough, she was dying on that highway, and I did not mourn her passing. My sister, Megan, lived 3 hours away. She was my opposite in every way, fiercely independent, a successful lawyer who had never prioritized marriage or children. We weren't close, our lives having diverged so completely, but she was family. And in that moment, I needed family. I arrived at her apartment building at 2 a.m, carrying a sleeping Lily in my arms. When Megan opened the door, her sharp, intelligent eyes took in my disheveled appearance, the overnight bag, the sleeping child, and she knew instantly that something was terribly wrong. She didn't press me for details, not then. She simply took Lily from my arms and settled her onto the pull-out sofa, then guided me to the kitchen and poured me a large glass of wine. "Drink," she said, her voice firm but kind. "Then you can tell me who I need to sue into oblivion." I told her everything. The words poured out of me in a torrent, a messy, incoherent flood of pain and anger. I told her about the message, the photos, the lies, the way they had made a fool of me in my own home. Megan listened patiently, her expression growing colder and more furious with each detail. When I finally finished, she was silent for a long moment, her fingers drumming a steady rhythm on the kitchen table. "Okay," she said finally, her voice devoid of pity, filled instead with a steely resolve. "Here's what we're not going to do. We are not going to cry and fall apart. We are not going to let that narcissistic bastard get away with this. He has underestimated you, Clara. We are going to make him pay for that mistake." We are going to burn his world to the ground and dance in the ashes. Her words were brutal, but they were exactly what I needed to hear. Pity would have weakened me. Her anger fortified me. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone in this fight. I had an ally, a brilliant, ruthless ally who saw this not as a tragedy, but as a declaration of war. That night, I didn't sleep. While Lily dreamt peacefully on the sofa, Megan and I sat at her dining room table, which quickly became our war room. We mapped out a strategy, a meticulous, multi-pronged attack that would dismantle Marcus's life with the same clinical precision he had used to dismantle mine. The first step, Megan insisted, was information. "We need to know everything," she said, her legal mind already identifying weaknesses and opportunities. "Finances, assets, hidden accounts, everything. Men like Marcus, arrogant men who think they're smarter than everyone else, they always leave a trail. Our job is to find it." That night, I logged into our joint bank accounts, my hands shaking so badly I could barely type the password. What I found confirmed my worst fears, and then some. There were regular, significant cash withdrawals from ATMs near Sophie's apartment. There were charges for expensive dinners at restaurants he'd never taken me to, hotel rooms booked for nights he was supposedly working late. And then I found it. A separate savings account, one I had no knowledge of, with a balance that was steadily growing. He wasn't just cheating, he was stealing from our family, siphoning off money that I had contributed to from a small inheritance my parents left me, money that was supposed to be for Lily's future. The audacity of it, the sheer, calculated greed, extinguished the last lingering embers of my love for him. Now, there was only ice. The next morning, I called him. I had rehearsed the conversation with Megan a dozen times, practicing how to keep my voice steady, how to sound like the worried, slightly helpless wife he expected me to be. When he answered, his voice was thick with fake concern. "Clara, honey, I was so worried. Is everything okay? Is your sister all right?" "She's fine," I said, my voice a pitch higher than usual, a trick Megan taught me to convey anxiety. It was just a false alarm, but Lily had so much fun with her cousins I thought we'd stay for the weekend. "Is that okay?" "Of course, sweetheart. Take all the time you need. I miss you guys already." The ease with which he lied was breathtaking. He wasn't just a cheater, he was a sociopath. "I miss you too," I whispered, and the lie tasted like acid on my tongue. "I'll call you tonight. I love you. Love you more," he said, and hung up. I stared at the phone, a cold smile touching my lips. He had no idea he was talking to a ghost. The woman he thought he knew was gone. And the woman who was coming for him was someone he couldn't possibly imagine. Before we continue with the story of my revenge, I want to take a moment and ask you a question. Please write in the comments which country you are watching this video from. It is always so fascinating to see where our global family is tuning in from. And if this is your first time on our channel, I would be so honored if you would subscribe. Your support is what allows us to bring you more epic tales of life, love, and sweet, sweet revenge. Now, let's get back to it. The next phase of our plan was surveillance. Megan, with her extensive network of legal contacts, found me a private investigator, a gruff, no-nonsense ex-cop named Frank. He was expensive, but as Megan pointedly reminded me, we would be using Marcus's own money to pay for it, a detail that brought me a savage sense of satisfaction. "So, the husband is sleeping with the nanny," Frank said during our first meeting, his tone bored, as if he'd heard this story 1,000 times. "It's a cliché for a reason, lady. What do you want from me?" "I want everything," I said, my voice hard. "I want photos. I want videos. I want proof of every lie, every secret meeting. I want a timeline of their affair so detailed that he won't have a single lie left to hide behind. I want to know where he is, who he's with, and what he's doing every minute he's not at work." Frank raised an eyebrow, a flicker of professional interest in his tired eyes. "You want to burn him. I can respect that." For the next 2 weeks, Frank became my shadow, feeding me a steady stream of information that painted a sickeningly clear picture of my husband's double life. He had a key to Sophie's apartment. They met there for long lunches several times a week. He had taken her on weekend trips to charming bed and breakfasts, trips he had told me were business conferences. Frank provided me with hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and photographs that were as damning as they were heartbreaking. Pictures of them holding hands while walking through a park, of him kissing her in a dimly lit parking garage, of them leaving her apartment in the early hours of the morning. Each photo was a fresh stab to the heart, but it also strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about a man who had made a mistake. This was about a man who was living a completely separate, parallel life, funded by my money and built on a foundation of lies. While Frank was documenting the affair, I was focused on the finances. With Megan's guidance, I began the painstaking process of untangling our financial web. I hired a forensic accountant, a quiet, meticulous woman named Diane, who delved into our records with the focus of a surgeon. She uncovered a labyrinth of deceit. Marcus had not only been siphoning money into his secret account, but he had also been taking out loans against our shared assets without my knowledge, forging my signature on the documents. He was systematically stripping me of everything, planning to leave me with nothing but debt and a broken heart. The scale of his betrayal was staggering. He wasn't just planning to leave me, he was planning to financially annihilate me, to ensure I would be too crippled to fight back. He wanted to leave me so destitute that I would have no choice but to accept whatever scraps he threw my way in a divorce settlement. He was building a case to prove I was incompetent, an emotional, flighty artist who couldn't handle money, who couldn't be trusted with the care of a child. It was all there, in the carefully worded emails to his lawyer, emails I now had access to thanks to Frank's less than legal but highly effective hacking skills. I read his words, his descriptions of me as unstable and emotionally fragile, and I felt a rage so pure it was almost peaceful. He was creating a narrative, a fiction that would serve his own selfish ends. Little did he know, I was creating a counter-narrative, one built on cold, hard, undeniable facts. While all this was happening in the background, I continued to play the role of the loving wife. I returned home after my weekend at my sister's, feigning relief and happiness to be back. I listened to his fabricated stories about his work week, nodding and smiling in all the right places. It was the most difficult acting job of my life. Every night, I would lie next to him in our bed, the space between us, a chasm of unspoken truths, and I would have to resist the urge to scream. I would have to fight the impulse to claw his lying eyes out. But Megan's voice was a constant mantra in my head. Don't show your hand. Wait until you have all the cards. The bigger the betrayal, the more public the fall. So I waited. I cooked his favorite meals, I wore the lingerie he liked, I listened to his problems and offered him my unwavering support. I was the perfect wife, a living, breathing testament to his own desirability, which only fueled his arrogance. He grew careless, emboldened by my seeming obliviousness. The late nights became more frequent, the secret phone calls less secret. He didn't even bother to hide the scent of her perfume on his clothes anymore. He thought he was invincible. He had no idea he was a dead man walking. The day of reckoning was approaching. I had chosen the venue for his public execution with meticulous care, his own 35th birthday party. It was an event he had been planning for months, a lavish affair to be held at our home. The guest list was a who's who of our life, his colleagues and boss, our neighbors, our mutual friends, and of course, his family. It was to be a celebration of his success, a testament to the perfect life he had built. It was, I decided, the perfect stage for me to tear it all down. In the week leading up to the party, I was a whirlwind of activity, the perfect hostess making sure every detail was flawless. I confirmed the caterers, ordered a magnificent 3-tiered cake, and arranged for a string quartet to play in the garden. Marcus was thrilled, preening under the attention. He saw my efforts as a reflection of my devotion to him, a testament to what a wonderful wife I was. He had no idea I was planning his funeral. I even extended a special invitation to Sophie. Marcus and I would be so honored if you would come to the party, Sophie, I said to her one afternoon, my voice dripping with false sincerity. You're part of the family, after all. The look of triumph in her eyes was almost comical. She thought she had won. She thought this was her official welcome into our social circle, the first step in replacing me. She accepted with an eagerness that was nauseating. I would love to, Mrs. Thompson. Thank you. Please, I said, my smile as sharp as a razor blade. Call me Clara. The night of the party, our house was transformed. Twinkling fairy lights were strung through the trees in our backyard. The string quartet was playing softly, and waiters moved through the crowd with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Over 100 people milled about, their laughter and chatter filling the warm evening air. Marcus was in his element, holding court, accepting compliments on his beautiful home, his beautiful wife. He looked impossibly handsome in a custom-tailored suit, the picture of a man who had it all. I was wearing a stunning, blood-red dress, a stark contrast to the muted, conservative clothes I usually wore. It was a declaration, a warning that he was too blinded by his own ego to see. When I walked down the stairs, a hush fell over the room. Marcus's eyes widened, a look of pure, possessive pride on his face. "Wow, Clara," he breathed, pulling me close. "You look dangerous." "You have no idea," I whispered back, smiling up at him. Sophie arrived shortly after, wearing a white dress that was just a little too short, a little too tight. She was trying to look angelic, but she just looked cheap. She moved through the party with a proprietary air, smiling at Marcus across the room, accepting drinks from his colleagues as if she belonged there. They were so confident, so sure of their victory. They had no idea they were lambs being led to the slaughter. I waited until the party was in full swing, until everyone had had just enough champagne to be relaxed and uninhibited. I waited until Marcus's boss was standing beside him, until his parents were looking on with proud smiles. Then, I picked up a champagne flute and tapped it gently with a spoon. The chatter died down as all eyes turned to me. "If I could have everyone's attention for just a moment," I said, my voice clear and steady, amplified by the portable microphone the DJ had set up earlier at my request. "I'd like to propose a toast," Marcus beamed, slipping his arm around my waist. He thought I was about to sing his praises, to be the adoring wife affirming his greatness in front of all his important friends and colleagues. "As you all know, tonight we are here to celebrate my wonderful husband, Marcus, on his 35th birthday," I began, my eyes scanning the crowd, meeting the curious gazes of our friends. "Marcus is a man of many talents. He's a successful businessman, a loving father, and a truly creative financial planner." A few people chuckled, thinking it was a joke. Marcus's smile tightened just a fraction. He knew I knew nothing about our finances. "He's also a man who believes deeply in family values," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "So much so that he has made our nanny, Sophie, feel like she's truly part of our family." I turned my head and smiled sweetly at Sophie, who was standing near the bar. She blushed and looked down, feigning modesty. A murmur went through the crowd. This was an odd speech. It was about to get a lot odder. "In fact," I said, my voice dropping into a more conspiratorial tone, "Marcus and Sophie have become so close, they've been sharing everything. They share lunches, they share late nights at the office. They even share a secret bank account where Marcus has been lovingly depositing money he's been stealing from our daughter's college fund." The silence that fell over the party was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the manicured lawn. Every smile was frozen, every eye wide with shock. Marcus's arm dropped from my waist as if he'd been burned. His face had gone a ghastly shade of white. "Clara, what are you doing?" he hissed, his voice a strangled whisper. "I'm giving a toast, darling," I said, turning to face him, my smile bright and merciless. "But I'm not finished yet." I turned back to our horrified audience. And because a picture is worth 1,000 words, and I know Marcus is a very visual person, I thought I'd share a few snapshots from their little family project. On cue, the 60-inch flat-screen television that Marcus had installed over the fireplace for game days flickered to life. Instead of a football game, a slideshow began to play. It started with the financial documents, the forged signatures, the statements from the secret bank account, all blown up in high-definition glory. Then came the photos. The photos from Frank, the private investigator, Marcus and Sophie holding hands, Marcus and Sophie kissing in the parking garage, hotel receipts with his name on them for weekends he was supposedly at conferences. And for the grand finale, the picture that had started it all. Sophie, in my robe, in my bathroom, with that smug little smile on her face. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Sophie let out a small, strangled sob and tried to flee, but she was surrounded by a wall of shocked faces. Marcus's boss was staring at him with an expression of pure disgust. His parents looked like they were about to faint. "So," I said, raising my champagne flute high in the air, "let's all raise a glass to my husband, Marcus, a man who taught me the true meaning of due diligence. And to Sophie, the nanny who was so good at her job, she decided to take on the role of the wife as well. May they both get exactly what they deserve. I took a long, slow sip of my champagne, my eyes locked on Marcus's. The look on his face was a grotesque mixture of terror, fury, and utter disbelief. He couldn't comprehend what was happening. In his world, women like me didn't fight back. We just cried. I hadn't cried in weeks. The chaos that erupted after my toast was everything I had hoped for and more. People started talking at once, their voices a rising crescendo of shock and disgust. Marcus's boss, a stern, old-fashioned man named Mr. Abernathy, walked over to him, his face a thundercloud. "Thompson, my office, Monday morning, and you're fired." He didn't even wait for a response before turning on his heel and stalking out of the house, his wife trailing in his wake. That was the first domino to fall. One by one, our friends and colleagues began to file out, their faces a mixture of pity for me and contempt for him. No one even looked at him. They just averted their eyes as if he were something unclean. His parents were the last to leave. His mother, a woman who had always treated me with a cool condescension, was openly weeping. His father, a man of few words, simply looked at his son and shook his head with a look of profound disappointment. "We raised you better than this, Marcus," he said, his voice heavy with shame, before leading his wife out into the night. Now, it was just the three of us, standing in the wreckage of our beautiful life. The string quartet had stopped playing, the caterers were quietly packing up their things, and the fairy lights in the garden seemed to be mocking us with their cheerful twinkling. Marcus finally found his voice. It was a hoarse, ragged thing, unrecognizable from the confident, charming voice he usually used. "How could you, Clara?" he croaked, his eyes wild. "How could you do this to me, in front of everyone?" "Do this to you?" I laughed, a cold, sharp sound that held no humor. "You mean, how could I tell the truth? You seem to have no problem doing what you did in secret. I just thought I'd bring it into the light. You know, for transparency's sake." Sophie was huddled in a corner, sobbing hysterically. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Thompson," she wailed. "I never meant for any of this to happen." "It's a little late for apologies, Sophie," I said, my voice flat. "And it's Clara. I believe I told you to call me Clara. You wanted my life so badly. You can start by using my name." I walked over to her and handed her a pre-prepared envelope. "This is your final paycheck, and a copy of the restraining order that will be filed on Monday morning. If you come within 500 feet of me or my daughter ever again, I will have you arrested. Pack your things and get out of my house." She scrambled away as if I had burned her, grabbing her purse and fleeing out the back door without a backward glance. Now, it was just me and Marcus. He took a step towards me, his hands outstretched in a pleading gesture. "Clara, please, we can fix this. It was a mistake, a stupid, meaningless mistake. It meant nothing. I love you, Clara. I've always loved you." The words were so pathetic, so transparently false, that I felt nothing but contempt. "Love?" I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "You don't know the meaning of the word. You don't love me. You loved the idea of me. You loved having a pretty, compliant wife who managed your home and raised your child while you did whatever you wanted. You loved that I trusted you, because it made it so easy to lie. You didn't make a mistake, Marcus. You made a series of deliberate choices. And now, you get to live with the consequences." I pulled another envelope from the pocket of my dress. "These are divorce papers. My lawyer will be in touch with yours on Monday. I want full custody of Lily, the house, and every penny you stole from me back, with interest. If you fight me on any of it, I will not only release the rest of the evidence I have to the press, but I will also press criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement. Your choice." The color drained from his face as the reality of his situation finally sank in. He had lost everything. His job, his reputation, his friends, his family. And now, he was about to lose his wife and child. He sank onto the sofa, his head in his hands, a broken, pathetic figure. He had built his entire identity on the foundation of being a successful, admired man. I had just taken a sledgehammer to that foundation. "I have nothing," he whispered. "You've left me with nothing." "No, Marcus," I said, walking towards the stairs, my red dress swirling around me. "You did this to yourself. You just thought I was too weak to hand you the bill." I paused at the bottom of the staircase and looked back at him one last time. "You should pack a bag. I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. I want you out of this house by morning. Then I turned and walked up the stairs, not looking back. I went into Lily's room and watched her sleep, her face peaceful and innocent. I had protected her. I had burned down a world built on lies to create a new one for her, one that would be built on a foundation of truth and strength. I had lost a husband, but I had found myself, and in the quiet of that night, surrounded by the ruins of my old life, that felt like a victory. 6 months later, I was sitting in a courtroom, listening to a judge finalize my divorce. The proceedings had been surprisingly swift. Marcus, faced with the mountain of evidence I had against him, had not contested a single point. He knew he had no leverage, no power. I got everything I had asked for: the house, full custody of Lily, and a financial settlement that not only returned all the money he had stolen but also included punitive damages for his fraud. He was a ruined man, both financially and socially. He had been forced to sell his luxury car and move into a small, dingy apartment on the other side of town. The friends who had once clapped him on the back now crossed the street to avoid him. He was a pariah, a living cautionary tale about the consequences of arrogance and deceit. As for Sophie, she had disappeared. I heard through the grapevine that she had moved back to her hometown, her reputation in our community utterly destroyed. No family would ever hire her as a nanny again. She had gambled everything on a married man and lost spectacularly. I felt no pity for either of them. They had made their choices. Now, they were living with them. The most satisfying part of the settlement, however, was not the money or the house. It was a clause Megan had insisted on including. It stipulated that Marcus had to pay for my therapy sessions for the next 5 years. Every week, when I sat with my therapist, Dr. Allen, and worked through the trauma of his betrayal, I knew that he was the one footing the bill. It was a small, petty detail, but it brought me an immense amount of satisfaction. That afternoon, after the court hearing, I picked Lily up from school. She was thriving, a happy, well-adjusted child who had weathered the storm of her parents' divorce with a resilience that amazed me. We had been honest with her, in an age-appropriate way. We told her that Daddy had made some big mistakes and that Mommy and Daddy couldn't live together anymore, but that we both loved her very much. She seemed to accept it, her child's world more focused on playgrounds and playdates than on the complexities of adult relationships. "Did you win, Mommy?" she asked as she buckled herself into the car seat. "Yes, sweetie," I said, looking at her bright, happy face in the rearview mirror. We won. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went into the spare room that had become my neglected art studio, uncovered my old easel, and began to paint. The colors exploded onto the canvas, a vibrant, chaotic expression of all the pain, anger, and eventual triumph I had experienced. I painted for hours, losing all track of time, feeling a part of myself that had been dormant for years, reawakening. I had given up my art when I married Marcus, believing that being a wife and mother was my new, more important creation. Now I realized that I didn't have to choose. I could be both. The woman I was becoming was not defined by her relationship to a man, but by her own passions, her own strengths, her own creations. 1 year after the divorce, I held my first solo art exhibition at a local gallery. The show was called Rebirth, and it was a collection of the raw, emotional paintings I had created in the aftermath of my life imploding. The gallery was packed on opening night. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers who had heard my story came to see the work. Mr. Abernathy, Marcus's old boss, was there. He bought my largest painting, a fiery abstract piece titled Scorched Earth. "My wife and I are so proud of you, Clara," he said, shaking my hand. "You're a testament to the strength of the human spirit." Megan was there, of course, a triumphant smile on her face as she watched me mingle with guests and accept praise for my work. "I told you we'd dance in the ashes," she whispered, handing me a glass of champagne. I just didn't realize the ashes would be so beautiful. I was standing by the gallery window, looking out at the city lights, when I saw him, Marcus. He was standing across the street, in the shadows, looking at the gallery, at the crowd, at me. He looked older, tired. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a deep, hollow sadness. Our eyes met for a brief moment across the street, and in that moment, I felt a flicker of something. It wasn't love, and it wasn't hate. It was pity. He had thrown away everything for a cheap, meaningless affair, and he would have to live with that knowledge for the rest of his life. I, on the other hand, had lost a lie and gained a life. I turned away from the window, back to the warmth and light of the gallery, back to the people who celebrated my strength, back to the future I was creating for myself, one brushstroke at a time. The ultimate revenge, I had discovered, was not in destroying someone else's life. It was in building your own, more beautiful one, and my life was just beginning.